Hi everyone, I'm Robert Bryndza and I'm really excited to be here to wish you all a happy World Book Day and to answer some questions that my Croatian readers have sent to me through my publisher. So I've got all the questions here and I'll start with a question from Josipa. And Josipa asks, is there a real Erica Foster? Is her character based on someone you know? She is so realistic in the book. She's one of the few main characters so vivid that I can imagine her as a real person. Thank you for the question. Yes, she is based on a real person. Well, she started out being based on a real person years ago when I first started to write the Erica Foster books. She was based on a friend of my husband's, who is very direct and very honest and a very funny person as well. And so that was the starting point for Erica Foster. But since then, she's gone off in a different direction, and maybe not in a different direction, but she's now become like a real person. And so when I write Erica Foster books, I sort of see Erica now. I don't see my friend who she started off as. And there's another question from the same person who asks, is it easier to write romantic comedy novels or crime novels? Which requires more preparation, and which genre do you prefer to write? I love writing in both genres, and I'm lucky, I think, that I am able to write in both genres. I think they're both just as hard as each other. I think all writing is quite difficult. And that leads very nicely in on the fact that I'm so excited that my romantic comedies are published in Croatia along with the Erica Foster books. So I'm really excited that both of them are available in Croatian. This is the 6th Erica Foster book, and this is the first in my Coco Pinchard romantic comedy series. But yes, I love to write both, and I feel really lucky that I'm able to write in both genres. So, let me put that back up there. Okay, Ivana asks, do you have an everyday routine when you are writing, or do you write only when you feel inspired? No, I have a routine, because I think if you hang around and wait for inspiration, often you won't do any writing. I think you've got to sit down every day, make a routine, and start writing, and then hopefully inspiration comes. And yes, and there's the same as another question from the same person asks, would you ever write a novel of a different genre, for example, a sci-fi novel? I'd love to write a sci-fi novel. I love sci-fi. And I've had an idea for a sci-fi novel, but I don't know if... I think I'm already really lucky that I get to write in two genres. So maybe I'll write it. I don't know. But I love sci-fi. It's one of my favorite genres to read. And I read a lot of sci-fi. Okay, another question from Slavica. And Slavica asks, I recently read a book in which a writer had a person who was employed to tell him he had to write. Do you have such a person who pushes you to write, and who is your inspiration? Yes, I do have a person who pushes me to write. It's my husband. He's very good at keeping me on track and making sure that I keep to deadlines, and I think all writers need that. I don't employ him to do that. I'm lucky that he does that because he loves reading my books. He's the first person who always reads my books. So yeah, I don't know if I would want to employ a person to do that. Yes, and who is my inspiration? Well, he's my inspiration in that he's always the first person who reads my book. Reads my books. And so I will often send what I've written to his e-reader, and that inspires me to keep writing, knowing that I've got this first reader who's really keen. So yes. Okay, so those first questions were from Instagram. Thank you. And now there's some questions from Facebook. So the first one from Facebook is from Tomislav Farkash, and Tomislav asks, how much does the experience you gained through acting help in creating the actions, dialogue, scenes, and atmosphere in your books? Well, I think that being an actor, and also not being a very successful actor, because I was an actor for about 6 years, and I worked lots, and I did some jobs I'm really proud of, but I was never on television or anything like that. So anyway, I think that it was really, really helpful, because I learned a lot about dialogue and characterization, and having to read so many scripts and transferring that into action as an actor. That was incredibly helpful. But I also think all the things that I did in between the acting jobs really helped me were inspirational. I mean, I did so many strange, weird and wonderful jobs. I mean, I worked in bars in London. I did all sorts of things like giving out free chocolate bars at train stations, and working in offices and working in shops, and all kinds of jobs, which I met lots of strange and wonderful people, lots of quite weird people, and it really prepared me as a writer, and I'm really glad I got to have that experience, and it was a lot of fun as well. I did a lot of fun jobs, and have a lot of happy memories. And the same person from Facebook, Tomislav, asks, do you see yourself perhaps in the future as a screenwriter of some theatrical or television play? Yeah, I hope so. I'd love to do that. In the past, I've written scripts, and I've written a play, and I wrote a lot of scripts as well before I was a published author. So that's definitely something that I would like to do. Yes. Okay. Next question is from Jelena Roknic. I think I've said that right. And she asks, can you tell us what is the theme of your next book? And I'm afraid I can't yet. There is another book. And actually, yes, I can, because I'm just thinking the next books in Croatia will hopefully be my new series. I've published a new crime thriller series about a private investigator, and I've just finished writing the third book in that series, and it's a bit different from the Eric Foster books because it's set outside London, and it's a private investigator, not a police officer, and I wanted to write a private investigator story to do something a bit different, because a private investigator doesn't have to follow the same rules that a police officer does. Not that Eric Foster follows the rules all the time. And so, yeah, I'm excited, hopefully, fingers crossed, that they will be published in Croatia. But I've got another book I've just finished writing that I can't tell anyone about, but hopefully there'll be some news very soon. Okay, next question is Maria Rubchik. If it would be possible to you to meet Erica Foster and be able to ask her a question, what would it be? I think I'd be quite scared to meet Erica Foster, because she's quite I'd be quite intimidated to meet her, to be honest. But I would ask her what her favorite place in Slovakia is, because Eric is a Slovak and I live in Slovakia, and I'd be quite interested to know a bit about her past in Slovakia. So I think that's what I'd ask her, which maybe is not the most interesting answer, but that's what I think. I find that really interesting about her. Yes. Okay. So another question from Facebook is Dunya Vojnovic. And the question is, I always read your acknowledgements, so I'm interested to know what makes this recipe for special roasted chicken, which your mother-in-law always makes while you're struggling to write, so special. Well, my mother-in-law's a really good cook, and she makes lots of great stuff. The roast chicken is delicious, firstly, and secondly, what's great about it is that I do all the cooking in our house, but when I have a deadline, I tend to write really long days, and I'll write around the clock, and there's no time to cook. And my mother-in-law is just great at always coming with food. So at the end of the day, there's nothing worse than getting to the end of a long day, like it's 8 o'clock at night, and I finish and there's nothing to eat, and all the takeaways are going to take 2 hours. And so that's what I meant by that. It's really lovely to know that there's lovely home cooked food at the end of the day, after, even if it's a late finish on a writing day. Okay, next question is from Tatiana Potatko, and Tatiana asks, Erica Foster's maiden name is Borodisheva. Did you, through her Slavic origin, intend to portray a Slavic character with a logical mind and straightforwardness? When did you decide that Erica Foster should be a Slavic character? Well, the name's actually from Erica Foster's maiden name. Her Slovak name is from a friend of mine, and she lives around the corner from us. And she had a very similar experience to Erica Foster in that she went to England when she was 18 to work as an au pair, and I always find it quite difficult to look to have names for my characters. I find it really difficult to keep interesting different names. So I'll take the names of characters from like friends or people I know, or often the credits of TV shows. I will take names from, the end of a film, the person who filmed it, and the person who did the catering, and the person who did the makeup. All those names are very useful to use. So on a practical level, that's where I got the name from. But I wanted to write an original detective character, and as far as I could tell, there wasn't a detective, a Slavic detective who was working in the UK in the British police force. So that was where that came from, and it was just because I was living in Slovakia, and I met lots of Slovaks, and I just was kind of intrigued by all the stories I'd heard, because so many of my husband's friends and other people I met had a very similar story, that they went to Britain and they worked in bars, or they were an au pair, and they did that to learn English. And I just thought, well, that's a great starting point, because all these people have gone on to have, amazingly different careers and do different things. And like my friend who she went to England to be an au pair, she's now a professor of linguistics at the university where we live. And like my husband, he went to England not knowing a word of English, and learned English, came back, and he's done all sorts of things. He translates my books into Slovak. And so that was the starting point, thinking that all these people, by taking that chance to go to a different country to learn a different language, sort of opened their life up in a different direction. And I thought, what if that direction was they became a police officer? So that's probably a really long answer, but yeah, that's how it came about. Okay, next question is from Sanya Kukor, and Sanya asks, when you get an idea for a new crime story, how do you conduct the research you need in terms of certain procedures, some scientific facts, the specifics of some profession, etc.? Do you check the facts yourself, or do you have some special help from someone? Well, both. I do a lot of research. I read a lot. I go on the internet. I Google. I talk to people. I also talk to police officers. I've talked to about 4 or 5 police officers now throughout researching books. I also have spoken to a police officer who's a specialist diver. I've also spoken to a prison governor, which was really interesting. So yeah, I try and talk to people, and what I love about talking to people as well is, especially if they're an expert on something, I'll say to them, oh, well, I want to do this in a book. Can I do this? And sometimes they'll say, well, no, it wouldn't happen. It wouldn't happen like that. Or in the police, it happens differently. So maybe you could do this. And they'll tell me a story about something that happened to them in real life, and an anecdote. And that's amazing, because it takes the story off in a different direction. And often it's the little things that people talk about, the little stories they have, that make it so interesting, and it makes it much more real when I write it. Like, for the third Eric Foster book, I spoke to a real life diving expert, and she told me all these stories of things that had happened when she was diving. And one story that made it into the book, a small thing, was when she was diving, she was diving to look for the body of a man who jumped in a lake, and it was very still water. And they spent ages looking for this body, and they couldn't find it. And then finally, as she was swimming or diving in the water, her hands closed around these two legs, and it was pitch black. She couldn't see anything. And the body had actually, the person had drowned, and they'd sunk to the bottom of the lake. And they were actually standing underwater on the bottom of the lake. And she said it was just very, very scary and very strange experience with the way the person was floating. So I put that in the book because it was such an interesting story. And there's lots of other little things like that if I'm lucky, I get to talk to people and find out those stories. So yes. And the same person asks, Sanya asks, we all love Eric Foster, thank you. But who is your favourite villain from your books? I don't know. That's a good question. I really like the villain in the second Eric Foster book, which in English is The Night Stalker. And I don't want to say too much because I don't want to give it away, because there's sort of a bit of a twist to who the villain is. But that was one of those things where it came out of, I don't know where it came from, and I really loved that character. And I'd love to write another book in the future with the same character, perhaps, and I don't know, find some kind of way to bring that character back. But yeah, I think it's that's my favourite villain. And okay, this is the last question. Wow, that's gone very quickly. And this is from Sanya Juric. And Sanya asks, would you ever consider writing a crossover where Erica would meet Coco and Kate? So yeah, if you don't know me very well, I write a crime thriller series with Erica Foster. I write romantic comedy series with Coco Pinchard, and my new crime series is about the private detective called Kate Marshall. I don't know if I'd do a crossover where Erica met Kate, because I don't know how that would work, because they're both very, very strong, and the books are kind of told from their perspective, so I'm not sure how that would work. But never say never. But I did, in the second Kate Marshall book, in an early draft, I had a scene where Kate and her assistant went to London, and they were looking for someone, or they were kind of lost in an area of London, and they went into a bookshop to ask for directions, and it just happened that Coco Pinchard was in the bookshop doing a book signing, and it was fun to write, but it was just a bit too funny and silly, and it didn't quite work. And then I was like enjoying too much writing Coco Pinchard. I wanted to give her a good cameo, and it just didn't work. So unfortunately, I had to cut it out of the book. So I don't know. Maybe in the future, something like that, I could do something like that, and it might work. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know about crossovers. I think maybe the characters are good in their own books. Okay, well, I just wanted to say thanks to everyone who sent questions. I really enjoyed answering all your questions, and I really enjoy reading all your messages online, on social media. And I'm really excited that my books continue to, be loved by people in Croatia. I mean, when I started out writing, I hoped that my books would be published in the English language. It's been an incredible bonus that they're published in Croatia. I'm really happy about that. So happy World Book Day to everyone, and carry on reading and enjoying books, and hopefully I'll see you soon. Okay, bye.